Hiya guys, Buildzoid here, and this video you're watching right now is being recorded by this thing. Yes, this awful mess on my desk. So that's my new daily system for now, because basically earlier today, this thing, this was the old daily system. I decided that I had enough of it. And the reason that I decided that I had enough of it is that basically the motherboard in there is a Gigabyte X370 Gaming K5. And it's actually a pretty decent motherboard, except it has some of the worst BIOSes available out there. Honestly, and the latest BIOS for me was just kind of the nail in the coffin where I was just like, you know what? That's it. I'm done. No more X370 Gaming K5 in my daily system. I'm getting a different board. So basically what's been going on is that I could go through the full story. So let's go through the full story of my daily system. So it looked like this. Also looked like this. And in both of these configurations, well, actually, let's talk about the most recent configuration, which is similar to this. And really the only difference between this setup right here and this setup is that this setup has an R9 Fury and that setup has a RX 580 in it, which incidentally, that RX 580 sucks. Like the heatsink on it, not that great. The GPU core on it, straight up terrible. But anyway, so terrible RX 580 aside, which incident I really overpaid for that card because that's actually like the golden sample version of the Red Devil, which is like the highest stock boot, like that's the highest stock boost clock version. And yeah, anyway, basically my personal system is like a disappointment build because it's built of all the parts that are too bad to use for benchmarking, right? Like the worst kit of memory that, yeah, you're looking at it, it's in there. So basically that's a 4x4 memory kit in there, and eventually that actually got converted to 4+8 and another 4+8, so 12 gigs of memory per channel, where it's a mishmash. So these memory sticks are some unidentified Spectec DDR4, which is a subsidiary of Micron, which I think is Micron's like binning reject dumping ground, because these memory chips barely go above 2400 megahertz. But anyway, so, you know, terrible memory in there. And I mix them up with some terrible Samsung B die, which doesn't behave like Samsung B die at all. Honestly, if somebody told you that it's Hynix MFR, you'd believe it because it clocks like MFR or AFR. But anyway, yeah, so, you know, eventually I upgraded it to 24 gigs. But the issues with the system are basically Gigabyte's BIOSes for the motherboard. Because the thing is, like, there's a few issues. Like the board is really imbalanced. So you have a 4+3 phase VRM that's just not very good, which is why I have a downdraft air cooler, because personally I would prefer something like a dual tower or a single tower. But with a Ryzen 7 1700, they don't really get, like, the 1700s really don't run that hot. They don't really pull that much power, so, you know, downdraft air cooler is enough for it. So yeah, that's a Be Quiet Top Flow 2, and I've swapped the fan out because I like my fans orange. It's really that simple. But yeah, so the 1700s don't really run that hot. Where was I going? Right, the VRM on the board's terrible, which is why I have the downdraft air cooler. Well, terrible. It could be worse, but this is about as bad as it gets. Like, it can always be worse, right? The funny thing about motherboards is, like, look, if you just keep removing components until it barely works, that's when you've hit the point where it's actually as bad as it gets. But until then, you know, as long as there's more, like, if you have 3 MOSFETs in each phase, then you can remove one of the MOSFETs. And if you have 4 phases, well, you could always just remove one of the phases, right? You can keep cutting things off the board until it's completely unusable. Anyway, so yeah, that was the cooling setup to compensate for the motherboard's VRM situation. The voltage control on the motherboard is kind of awful, which is why we have the voltage readout over here, which that's VCore readout. But the thing is, the board actually has a really cool set of, like, it has a ton of USB, which is, for me, is huge, because right now the daily system doesn't even have all of the web cameras plugged into it because I ran out of USB ports. So yeah, it has a ton of USB. It has 2 internal USB 3.0 headers, which this one this is before, yeah, so this is before I had the 5 1/4 inch USB thing, but Eventually, I used that header as well. That USB header over there eventually got used up as well. So it had two internal USB 3.0s, and it had Intel LAN, and it had a clock gen. So it has a really cool mix of features, and then the BIOS and the VRM are awful. And, well, the BIOS wouldn't be so bad if it weren't for the fact that Gigabyte keeps breaking it. So the first bad BIOS that came out for this motherboard was the F25 BIOS. If you install the F25 BIOS, it basically tries to destroy your system on a chip portion of your Ryzen CPU. Because it effectively, like, I think it shoves like 1.4 or 1.5 volts of SOC into the SoC. That's bad. That's really bad. And effectively what that achieved is, like, I managed to roll back the BIOS before it actually killed the CPU, though I have no doubts that if I ran it for like 24 hours, there'd be nothing left of the memory controller and the system on a chip portion of the CPU. But I managed to roll back before that happened because I did notice that, wait a minute, these voltage readings are like way out of whack. And then I think I even checked it with a multimeter, and then I was like, wait a minute, are you freaking kidding me? 1.5 volts? Do you want to kill my chip? So anyway, I rolled back the BIOS, but unfortunately it was a bit too late because at this point, the Ryzen 7 1700 that's currently recording this video does not function on 0.9 volts SoC voltage, or on stock SoC voltage. You need to run at least like 1.05 volts SoC for this thing to get into Windows. Otherwise, it's not making it into Windows because the SoC portion of the chip is so heavily degraded, which is great, right? Like, I need, like, I think it's 200 millivolts above spec to function. So that's great. Yeah, so that was the first really bad BIOS update. F25 blows up your CPU. Well, the most recent BIOS update is F40, I think, or at least I think F40 is the one that's currently on the board. And F40 basically causes an issue where for some reason, I think it's an over temperature protection tripping too early, but I haven't really been bothered to troubleshoot it too much because it's my daily system, right? It exists to play games and to record videos. And if it can't play games, then it'll just record videos until I get sick and tired of it. And like, I don't feel like spending hours and hours troubleshooting my daily system to figure out what's wrong with it, just so that I can, play some games. So, yeah, basically for like 2 months or something, I was just like not able to play any games, which is just great. Well, Minecraft works because Minecraft isn't heavy enough on the GPU, but anything that put serious strain on the GPU would just cause the whole system to lock up, which is, well, not even lock up, it would just suddenly shut down, which is why I'm like, okay, that's probably over temperature protection, because if it was over current protection, it would shut down and not reboot. If it's over temperature protection, it'll shut down and potentially immediately reboot, depending on how badly the OTP is set up. So anyway, yeah, so BIOS F40 and the system's just randomly been shutting down and crashing, crashing on me. And well, earlier today it did that, and I was like, okay, you know what? I'm done. No more X370 Gaming K5 in my daily system. I have an X370 Taichi. I have an X470 Gaming Pro Carbon. I have motherboards for days, basically. I'm just like if this motherboard isn't going to behave after, everything I've suffered, I'm just putting a different motherboard in the system. And that's how the system ended up like this. So yeah, it's super dusty because I've neglected to maintain it for ages and ages and ages, which also made me realize I actually don't want to rebuild the system in a case again because, well, I've just realized that maintenance, like, the thing is, you'd think an open air test bench would be a complete disaster in terms of dust, but for me at least, it's easier to clean an open air test bench than it is to clean a case, like a full case like this. So it's just like, I'd rather have the open air test bench and clean it more often than this, and for like basically neglect it like that. Because this thing is actually a pain to clean, whereas an open air test bench, not so much. So yeah, super dusty, and I just tore it down, and this is what the current state of it. Because at the time, I wasn't thinking of making a video. I was just like, look, basically, I was I was really, angry at that point because it was just like, I like, as I said, it was like I was done with it. New freaking board as fast as possible. And throughout the process, I realized, you know what? I don't even really want to rebuild it in the case. And so this is currently recording the video. Yeah. X370 Tai that looks like this because it was prepped for liquid nitrogen. I actually pulled the plasti dip off the back of the board because there's no point having it on the back of the board when it's not actually running liquid nitrogen, right? But I kept it on the front because I do think these orange streaks are kind of cool. Though the thing is I do realize that I'm going to be putting this top like downdraft air cooler back on it, and they're probably just going to get covered up again, so you're not going to see any of them anymore. But yeah, so that's the board that's currently running the system. And then we're still on the same degraded Ryzen 7 1700 RX 580. That sucks. Like the memory on it's really good. The core just absolutely bloody sucks. And yeah, and we're back on the. You can see how the memory sticks are mismatched, which actually is more obvious in this video, this shot. So yeah, you can see how like that stick and that stick are different. So those are the 4 gig sticks, and then there's the 8 gig terrible Samsung B die in between that, still the same power supply. And you can see how some of my USB cables aren't plugged in because this doesn't have enough USB ports. Yay. And there's no capture card in it, and it's really temporary right now. So I'm actually going to be switching the system over to a open air test bench. This one. And the reason I'll be moving into this one is really, really simple because, well, I don't need water cooling support, but I do want to have, you know, a lot of hard drive bays and 5.25-inch bays and that kind of thing. And it has a relatively small footprint, right? If we look at it from the side, it's not really any larger than the actual ATX motherboard, so it really works out quite well for me. It reduces significantly like the space that the system is taking up right now on my desk, which right now like it's sprawling across basically as it's taking up basically as much space as the full tower did. This is actually probably going to take up slightly less space, and it's going to be much easier to work on if I want to swap GPUs or memory or just do any upgrades. Because the thing is like there was like a lot of things that I wanted to change about my daily system that just didn't get done because it was just like a pain to unplug everything, take it off the desk, take it apart, you know, take off the side panels, do the thing, then reassemble the whole thing. Especially because the other thing is with open air test benches, like the cable management, like yes, you have a mess of cables just kind of hanging out and for everyone to see, but it also means that when you need to dig through the cables to unplug something or something like that, it's much easier because the cables are just kind of hanging out, you know, free free to be removed and adjusted as you require. And so yeah, I'm going straight back to an open air test bench. It's going to be with the X370 Tai here. I'm also thinking I'm going to go to 32 gigs of Micron Revision E memory. Because the X370 Tai is actually a T topology board, which I didn't realize it was. So yeah, it looks like ASRock's been running T topology on their motherboards for far longer than I realized. But yeah, it's a T topology board, and so I'm thinking, you know, 4 sticks of Micron Revision E, 32 gigs of RAM. We'll probably do like 3200 megahertz, maybe more. But 3200 should be actually possible because yeah, like that should be within the capabilities of the motherboard, though who knows, maybe the CPU is so degraded at this point that it won't do it. What else is there? So yeah, and if I'm going to be getting the Micron Revision E memory, then obviously I'm going to be, you know, testing it in some other system. Like I'm first going to make some videos about it. I'm just thinking of buying like a bunch of that 3000 CL15 Crucial memory because it's super cheap, right? And it'll work great. It overclocks great. Like the one stick I have of it is actually awesome, so I'm just like, yeah, just buy more of them, and I just need 3 more sticks, and bam, I'm done. Yeah, and then move that into the Lion Light case. Add a bunch of USB. Like you can see that right there is a 5.25-inch SD card reader with a bunch of USB as well on it. But I'm also planning on like a PCIe 1X card that's like a bunch of USB ports, and the capture card will go back in. And yeah, I'm gonna be updating the daily system a bit because yeah, it's been kind of a disaster and a mess. And yeah, it's a shame though that the X370 Gaming K5 didn't work. Because honestly, now that I think about it, I'd be cool with running the X370 Gaming K5 on an open air test bench as well. But with the BIOS updates that Gigabyte's been putting out for it, it's just like, it's so bad. Like, it's really unbearably bad at this point. So And I don't know, you might be like, oh, but Buildzoid, you could just roll back to like F30 or something to a BIOS that doesn't do what F40 does. But the thing is, I don't want to do that. Like, I'm sick and tired of dealing with crap BIOS updates for that board. Um, so yeah, and also the other thing is the VRM on that board isn't that great, and the BCLK, I don't even use the BCLK in functionality on it for my daily system because, as I said, the memory is so bad. Like, if I had better memory, I might actually use the BCLK functionality, but as it is, my memory is so freaking, like, the memory in my daily system doesn't go about 2400 megahertz, or like, you don't really want to be pushing it about 2400 megahertz for your own, sanity, because it can kind of do 2666, but it's not fun. Um, and so I've just kind of decided, well, I'm not using the BCLK. I do still like the USB ports, but I can just add those at this point, right? Like, I can just add those. I get a better VRM, and I get to go back to an open air test bench, and everything's going to be, though the open air test bench doesn't depend on the motherboard, right? But I do get a postcode. I do get a postcode. So I guess that's a big win. More SATA ports as well, though I'm not actually going to use that many. This still has dual USB 3.0. It also has the Intel LAN, so it checks most of the boxes. It just kind of lacks in the USB department. Also, the X370 Gaming K5, when it worked, was actually straight up better at overclocking than the Taichi. Like, there's a reason I chose the K5 over the Taichi right from the start, and it's the K5 was actually better. But the thing is, Gigabyte's been putting out BIOS update after BIOS update for it that are just god awful. That I've just decided, yeah, I'm gonna daily a freaking X370 Taichi, a motherboard that's been living in a box for like 2 years because actually longer than that, because I couldn't find a use for it because it's so bad. Well, no, because it's not really a spectacular motherboard in any way, but I guess at least it'll be reliable, or at least that's my hopes at this point, right? As long as it doesn't crap out anymore, I'll be happy with it, because yeah, that's the thing. My daily system is a piece of junk. Anyway, so that's kind of that for this video. Yeah, the suffering I go through, right, because of my hardware decisions. The thing is like, I obviously, like, the ultimately the daily system is not built according to my ideals of the perfect daily system, right? It's just built from what I consider scrap. So, I mean, what do you expect? If it was built from like my ideal motherboard, then I think, like, right now, if I had to build it, it would probably be like an X470 gaming Pro Carbon, 32 gigs of Micron E-die, not that RX 580. I'd probably go for like one of those golden Sapphire RX 590s, just because I'm a Sapphire fanboy and I want a golden RX 590. Yeah, Gaming Pro Carbon, Gold RX 590, or I'd take a Vega. A Vega could also work, because the thing is, like, one of the things about my daily systems is they're always AMD GPUs, because their multi-monitor support is just far more convenient for me. So, yeah, and I have just daily AMD GPUs, and I prefer them for that reason. I don't really play games that graphically intensive, so at the end of the day, I don't care that much about having top-end, GPU performance. So, yeah. So right now, actually, yeah, if I was throwing together a daily system right now, it would be like a 2700 X470 Gaming Pro Carbon, 32 gigs of Micron E-die, and then like a Vega 56, because you can get Vega 56 in the UK like stupid cheap. They're like 200 quid right now. So, yeah. Except, like, honestly, even that is just like, that's too expensive for me to just, like, throwing together a daily system like that. Actually, no, I wouldn't even go for the X470 Gaming Pro Carbon. You could get away with like a B450 Gaming Pro Carbon. That would save you some more money on the motherboard. I wouldn't really make a difference to the overclocking. But, yeah. So, okay, that's finally it for this video. Thanks for watching, I guess. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down. And actually, don't leave any suggestions. I'm not going to read them. Not for my daily system. I don't want to hear it. It's a pile of trash, and it's just like... And it's mostly my fault that it's so bad. It's just like, whatever. Yeah, so don't bother with any suggestions. If you'd like to support the upgrades to my daily system, I do have a Patreon as well as a Teespring. Which incidentally, if I was buying like 32 gigs of the Micron E die, which I still want to do because I want to test Micron E die on like X299 and Z390 and dual rank and like a whole bunch of stuff, right? Um, still, yeah, I do have a Patreon. There's G's. Now I feel like a massive shill. Like I really do feel like a massive shill. This is stupid. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. I'm hitting the stop button.